Hey Kenny, how's things?
Good, how are you?
Things are going just great. I wanted to circle back on our previous discussion about methods development and kind of continue with the conversation that we had started. We started talking about manipulating selectivity by, alternating different base particles, bonded phases. And again, I wanted to continue that conversation and start talking about pH and how you can use pH to manipulate a selectivity to drive methods development.
pH can be a very important factor when doing method development for a couple of different reasons. So if we look back at the resolution equation, we see that mobile phase pH can have an effect not only on selectivity, but also on retentivity. At different pHs, your analytes may or may not be charged. And in reverse phase, that affects their retention. So at low pH, any basic analytes will be charged and therefore more polar and retain less. And at high pH, those same analytes, those same basic analytes won't be charged anymore and will be therefore less polar and better retained. So pH can have a lot of effect on a couple of different things. And I have an example I want to show you of just this point.
Oh, this is a really good example, Kenny. I can see from this chromatogram what you're showing here is just a good mix of different analytes. I see some basic analytes, which are highlighted in blue, some acidic analytes highlighted in red, and it looks like there's some neutral analytes there that are just highlighted in black. And what you're showing here, which is really great, is just those set of analytes run at two different pHs. So using ammonium hydroxide, which would be high pH, and then obviously 0.1% formic acid at low pH. You can see how the selectivity is changing as you change the pH.
Exactly, and that's why I ran this separation. I was trying to demonstrate this to one of my colleagues, and this mix worked out really well because at high pH, as you can see, all of the basic analytes are better retained than they are at low pH, and the inverse is true for the acidic analytes. At low pH, they're better retained than at high pH.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. As analytes become unionized or uncharged, they become more hydrophobic. And as we know in reverse phase, when things are more hydrophobic, they're often more retained.
Exactly.
Now, I know at the last episode where we talked about base particles, we talked about hybrids and silica, and we talked a little bit about hybrids being important, for methods development because they can use elevated pH mobile phases, where silica is primarily for low pH, typically less than pH 8, most likely less than pH 7 there. When it comes to stability in running high pH, that can be a real concern for method developers. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so exactly what you mentioned before. Hybrid particles were designed to be able to be used at high pH because of that, organic portion embedded in the silica. What it does is it provides that pH stability. And that can definitely be seen when we do stressed conditions to test these particles, which we do for all of our stationary phases, is see what stability they have. So as you can see here, we have a couple of different plots of column efficiency under stressed conditions. So what we did here was we used high pH mobile phase and high temperatures to really test how stable these stationary phases were. And you can see the purple and the red plots, which are the more modern hybrids, BEH, the XBridge BEH-C18 and the X-Select CSH-C18, they're very stable over this testing time. Some of the other phases, though, they're less stable, considerably less stable, and you see their efficiencies drop off very quickly. Now, that could be because they're pure silica stationary phases, or it could be because they're a previous generation hybrid that just weren't as stable. A lot of work went into making these hybrid columns stable at high pH because we knew this was such a driving force for selectivity. So not only is high pH stability important to consider when looking at a stationary phase, but also low pH. People tend to overlook that one because everyone uses low pH. But for some stationary phases, it's very important to consider low pH stability of your analytes, especially if you have a monofunctionally bonded ligand.
Yeah, that's a really great point you make there about low pH, Kenny, is that, when we think about attack of the stationary phase at low pH, it's all about stripping off that bonded phase. So when you had mentioned monofunctional versus, say, trifunctional, right, that one attachment point is much more susceptible to low pH hydrolysis. And here is just an example of a bunch of different stationary phases, again, with different bonding properties. And we can see how stable those stationary phases are at low pH by the length of bar graph shown here. So the shorter the bar graph, the more stable they are at low pH. And you can see just an example, again, BEHC18, which we tout as excellent stability at high pH, also has really good stability or excellent stability at low pH. And that's due to that trifunctional bonding, where we now have 3 attachment points down to the surface. So again, when you're trying to get these trusted methods, doing method development, it's really ideal that you're picking the best stationary phase for that work.
Exactly. And I know a lot of other vendors do similar testing for their columns, but we really make sure that our columns are fit for what you need and for what the scientist needs. So we've talked a little bit about pH stability, but I'm still curious. Are there any like papers you can reference me to just so that I can read more up on it so that way I can talk more intelligently about it?
For sure, for sure. Yeah, hybrids have been around for a long time. So there's a lot of really great peer-reviewed papers out there. There's a white paper that really talks about the benefits of bridged ethyl hybrid,
Okay.
that Waters introduced back in 2004. So again, it's an older technology, but it's still fantastic. And even CSH is a great white paper on that I think was introduced in 2010. So a lot of great literature that, again, talks about the stability of the different stationary phases, whether it's silica or hybrid, and really the best places to use those for to give you the best results.
At the end of the day, that's the part that I really am interested in, is getting the best results I can for my separation, because I have to be able to trust it. I have to be able to trust my separation.